What's the craziest secret you found out about your best friend? Jealousy isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides behind the warmest smile, the tightest hug, the words that sound just right. I learned that the hard way, with a betrayal that came not from a stranger or a rival, but from the person I once trusted the most. Mia. For years Mia was my anchor. We met in middle school, two awkward girls drawn together by a shared love of old music and doodling our dreams in the margins of textbooks. She had an easy charm, sarcastic, funny, always ready to defend me from bullies or talk me down from panic. By high school we were inseparable. People called us the twins, not because we looked alike, but because we moved through the world like we were one. She knew everything about me, my fears, my secrets, my goals. I let her into every corner of my life without hesitation. When I landed my internship at the local magazine, she was the first to scream with joy. When I got my heart broken sophomore year, she brought me cupcakes and made me laugh until I cried. It never crossed my mind that Mia could be anything but safe. We planned our futures together. We'd get apartments in the same city, maybe even live together. She talked about opening a boutique. I'd write features on her for my magazine. We imagined double dates, shared vacations, a friendship that would never age. The first real crack in that image didn't come from a fight or a betrayal. It came from a moment I would only recognize in hindsight, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes when I told her about Jared. Jared was different. He wasn't like the guys I'd dated before. He was thoughtful, attentive, and surprisingly serious about wanting something real. I met him at a campus reading, where he complimented my critique of a poem he hadn't even liked. He made me feel seen. And for once I didn't need to consult Mia before I let myself fall. She smiled when I introduced them, made jokes about how he was finally worthy of the queen. But something about the way she held her phone a second longer when I leaned in for a hug, or how she started skipping our weekly movie nights, it lingered like the echo of a bad dream. Still, I brushed it off. She was probably just adjusting, right? Everyone goes through a little awkwardness when their best friend starts dating. Besides, she had never been the clingy type. I gave her space. But there was a moment, small, fleeting, but now burned into memory, when I caught her watching us across the room at a party. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And when Jared leaned in to kiss me, I swear I saw her flinch. That should have been a sign. Instead, I told myself, she's just tired. She's stressed. She's Mia. She would never. Because when someone is your best friend for nearly a decade, betrayal is the last thing you prepare for. So I kept letting her in. I told her when Jared first said he loved me. I laughed with her about how awkward he looked dancing at that wedding. I shared my growing dreams with her, about love, career, travel, never suspecting that with every word I was feeding a quiet resentment. And then came that night. It was just us, sitting in my apartment, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing. The kind of night we'd had hundreds of times before. She was quiet, more than usual, but I chalked it up to stress. She had mentioned that work was overwhelming, that she felt stuck. I offered support, told her I believed in her, like always. Then, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, muttered something about needing to step outside. I didn't think anything of it, until I heard her voice. She thought she was far enough down the hallway, but I could hear her through the thin walls, low and urgent. "No, I told you I'd handle it. She doesn't suspect anything, just don't text me when I'm with her." It wasn't the words that chilled me, it was the tone. Controlled, cautious. Like someone managing a secret she couldn't afford to let slip. When she came back inside, she smiled like nothing had happened. I didn't ask. Not yet. I wasn't ready to know. Because knowing meant unraveling the world we had built together. Instead, I poured her another glass. We watched old episodes of Gilmore Girls, and when she fell asleep on my couch, I tucked a blanket over her and whispered, "You're my best friend, always." I meant it. But something had changed, and in the quiet I started to wonder, for the first time, if Mia still felt the same. The changes didn't come all at once. They crept in like shadows during twilight, almost imperceptible at first. A missed call here, a vague excuse there. Mia began pulling away in ways I didn't fully understand, and I kept rationalizing them, giving her grace because that's what best friends do. When I told her Jared had surprised me with tickets to a weekend cabin trip, she forced a laugh. "Must be nice to have someone who plans things," she said, barely looking up from her phone. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Just tired. Work's been hell," she muttered. I let it go. Then she stopped showing up to our study sessions. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "You and Jared have your thing. I don't want to be the third wheel." That stung. Maya had always been blunt, but now her words had teeth. I reassured her, tried to balance my time better, but it didn't matter. No matter how much effort I made, something had shifted in her. And it wasn't just about me and Jared, it was deeper. One afternoon, I invited her to lunch at our favorite cafe, hoping to reconnect. She arrived 20 minutes late. eyes hidden behind large sunglasses. She didn't apologize. Instead, she sat down and immediately launched into a story about a coworker who had the audacity to get promoted before her. "You'd be so good in that role," I offered. "Obviously," she said, tone sharp. I smiled gently. "I mean it. You just need—" She cut me off. "Don't patronize me." "Okay." Silence settled between us like fog. After that, I stopped reaching out so much. She didn't notice. Still, I missed her. The real her. The girl who once sang off key with me during road trips, who cried when I got into my dream program because she knew how hard I'd worked. But that version of Mia felt like a ghost now, someone I only glimpsed in old photos or memories. Then came the night everything cracked wide open. Jared and I had been dating for 5 months. He invited me to a party at his friend's place, a cozy backyard gathering with lights strung through the trees and soft indie music humming in the background. Mia was there, invited through mutual friends. I hadn't known she'd be coming. When I saw her, something clenched in my chest. She looked stunning in that effortless way she always had. Fitted black jeans, a crimson blouse, her hair falling in soft waves. She spotted us, smiled, and walked over. "Didn't know this was your scene," she said to Jared, then turned to me. "You look cute." It was meant to sound kind, but cute hung in the air like a backhanded slap. Jared nodded politely. "Hey, Mia. Glad you're here." She stayed with us for most of the evening, orbiting our conversations but never fully engaging. When Jared went inside to grab drinks, she leaned closer to me. "You really like him, huh?" I smiled. "Yeah, he's different," she nodded slowly. "Just don't lose yourself in it. Some guys, they like you better when you're small." It was such an odd thing to say. I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" She gave a tight smile. "Nothing, just be careful." Before I could respond, Jared returned and handed me a drink. Mia wandered off moments later. Later that evening, I found her by the fence alone, scrolling her phone. I joined her, half hoping for a moment of honesty, maybe a reconnection. "You okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "Parties aren't really my thing." I waited, then she turned to me, her expression unreadable. "You've changed, since Jared?" I blinked. "I have? You're softer, or quieter, I don't know, less you." I wanted to laugh, or cry. Instead, I whispered, "I thought I was growing." She looked away. "Maybe." I left that night with a lump in my throat. The next day, I texted her, "Did I do something wrong? I feel like we're slipping away." She didn't respond. A week later, we had our girls' night, just the two of us. It was supposed to be our reset. But even then, she wasn't really present. She laughed at the wrong times, stared into her phone too often, and drank more than usual. At one point, I asked her, "Do you want to talk about what's been going on?" She looked at me, eyes glassy. "What do you mean?" "I feel like we're not us anymore." She chuckled bitterly. "Maybe we grew up. Maybe that's it." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away gently. "I'm fine. Just tired." And then her phone buzzed again. Without a word, she stood up and walked to the balcony. I watched her through the glass as she spoke quickly, urgently. Her other hand trembled slightly. When she returned, she forced a smile. "Sorry, just work stuff." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But inside, a storm was brewing. Something was wrong. Something was hidden. And I was finally ready to find out what. I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I woke up with the uneasy feeling still pulsing in my chest. I replayed the night over and over. The tone in her voice, the sudden shift in energy, the urgency of that call. For years, Mia had been the person I trusted most, the one who could read my silences and fill them with warmth. But now, there were silences between us that she didn't even try to interpret. I tried not to pry. I tried to convince myself that the distance was just part of growing up, of navigating relationships and new priorities. But doubt crept in where trust used to live, and it wasn't just about Mia acting strange, it was about me finally noticing. A week after our awkward girls' night, a small group of our college friends planned a casual hangout. Pizza, wine, movies, nothing fancy. Jared had other plans, so I decided to go alone, hoping it would give me a chance to relax. Mia was supposed to be there too, but she texted last minute. "Hey, sorry, can't make it. Work emergency." I didn't think twice, not until I got up to use the bathroom and saw something that made my blood run cold. One of our mutual friends, Layla, had left her phone on the kitchen counter. A message popped up on the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. But the preview line from the notification was impossible to ignore. "She actually thinks we're still friends." I froze. My heart started pounding. I didn't even know if it was about me, but something in my gut told me it was. The message was from a group chat, one I'd never seen before, the title vague but familiar, Queen Bee's Point. When Layla returned, I tried to play it cool. I forced myself to sit through the rest of the movie night, though my thoughts were spiraling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering, was there a whole world behind my back where I was the punchline? The next day, I texted Lila, "Hey, random question, am I in the Queen Bee's group chat?" She didn't reply. Then, 10 minutes later I was removed from a different group chat, the one we all used for casual updates. That was my answer? A pit opened up in my stomach. I went into full spiral mode. I racked my brain, trying to remember moments when people had laughed a little too hard, when someone had whispered and glanced at me too quickly. I felt like I was unraveling a story that had already been written behind my back. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I borrowed Jared's phone. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know. I waited until he was in the shower, knowing he wouldn't suspect anything. I didn't want to look through his messages with Mia. I needed to, and that's when I saw it, a long thread of texts between them, some innocent, others not. Maya had texted him months ago, you know, if she wasn't in the picture we'd probably be perfect. And worse, he'd replied, "You're not wrong. But that's not how this works." My breath caught in my throat. Another message from her. "I don't get what you see in her. She's not as deep as she thinks." His reply, "Don't say that. She's been through a lot." I felt dizzy. The more I scrolled, the more bile rose in my throat. There wasn't clear cheating, but there was something. Emotional intimacy, boundary crossing, and the worst part, neither of them had told me. I confronted Jared that same evening. He looked ashamed the moment I brought it up. "It wasn't like that," he said. She started texting. "I didn't want to start drama." "You engaged with it?" I said, voice shaking. "You didn't shut it down. You let her talk about me like that." "I didn't mean to hurt you." But he already had. The betrayal wasn't just what Mia had done. It was what everyone around me allowed to happen. No one said anything. No one warned me. I'd been the fool in my own story, and everyone else had a front row seat. I decided I needed to talk to Mia. Not over text, not over the phone, in person, because some truths need to be seen, not just heard. The coffee shop was our old spot, neutral territory, a quiet corner cafe tucked between campus and the bookstore, with soft lighting and mismatched furniture. We used to spend hours there, scribbling notes in our journals, exchanging playlists, dreaming about someday. Now I walked in with a pounding heart, unsure if the girl I once knew would even show up, but she did. Maya arrived 5 minutes late, wearing her usual dark denim jacket and oversized scarf. Her expression was unreadable, casual, like this was just another coffee date. She slid into the seat across from me, folded her hands and gave me a shallow smile. "You look intense," she said. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her. Really looked, searching for the friend I used to trust. But all I saw was someone rehearsed, ready for defense. "I saw the messages," I said finally. For a moment, her face went blank. Then her lips twitched into a smirk so slight it almost didn't register. "What messages?" "Don't play dumb," I said quietly. "The ones between you and Jared. And the group chat I know about Queen Bees." That wiped the smirk away. She looked down then back up, her jaw tightened. "You went through his phone?" "Yes," I said I did, because I knew something was wrong. And now I know how wrong. She gave a soft scoff and leaned back in her chair. "So what? You wanted to catch me being a monster?" "No," I whispered. "I wanted to be wrong." Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. People moved around us, ordering drinks, typing on laptops, but our world had shrunk to this small table and everything we'd both buried. Mia exhaled. "Fine. Yes, I said some things I shouldn't have." I was angry. Confused. "At what?" I asked, voice trembling. "At me? For dating someone? For being happy?" Her eyes flashed, suddenly alive with something I hadn't seen in years. "You don't get it? You never did? Then help me understand." She laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You always had everything handed to you. Internships, friends, guys who adored you. I worked twice as hard just to be seen, and I was still just your funny best friend in the background." My throat tightened. "I never thought of you like that." "No, but everyone else did," she snapped. "They'd talk about you like you were magic. And I was just standing next to you, invisible. You could have said something." "I couldn't," she said, voice breaking. "Because I was your best friend. I was supposed to support you, remember? Not be jealous. Not fall for the guy you loved. Not feel like I was disappearing every time you walked into a room." That last line hit harder than I expected. I stared at her, stunned. "You loved Jared?" She looked away, wiping at her eye roughly. "I don't know. Maybe I just loved the idea of someone choosing me over you for once." We sat there, suspended in a silence thick with everything we hadn't said for years. "You hurt me," I said quietly. "I know. You mocked me, lied to me, let people laugh about me behind my back." Her eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. I didn't know how to stop. I kept digging the hole deeper, and I didn't want to admit how ugly I'd become. There was a moment, just one, where I saw her as she once was. The Mia I knew. The girl who once held my hand when I was too afraid to speak in class, who danced with me in the rain after finals, who whispered dreams to the stars with me. But that version of her had made a choice, and this version couldn't be part of my life anymore. "I loved you like a sister," I said, my voice breaking. She nodded slowly. And I loved you. But I didn't know how to love you without hating myself. That was it. The truth beneath it all. The coffee grew cold. I stood up. I hope you find peace, Maya. She looked up, her face crumpling just slightly. You won't forgive me, will you? Not today. I walked out of the coffee shop, the bell chiming behind me like the last note of a song we'd sung together for too long. And as I stepped into the pale afternoon light, I realized some friendships don't end with explosions. They end in the quiet, where love used to live. Days passed like slow drips from a leaky faucet. Every time I picked up my phone, muscle memory tempted me to text her, send a meme, share a thought, ask what she was wearing to next Friday's gallery show. But then I'd remember she wasn't my person anymore, and I didn't know how to live in a world where Maya wasn't mine. Still, life went on. I focused on school. I leaned into my writing. Jared tried to be there, but something between us had frayed. We tried to pretend it hadn't happened, that he hadn't betrayed my trust, even just emotionally. But that space between what I knew and what I could forgive grew wider by the day. One night, about 3 weeks after the confrontation, he came over unannounced. I opened the door, expecting another half-hearted apology. But this time, he looked different. Pale, tired, like someone who had finally run out of excuses. I need to tell you something, he said. I stepped aside, letting him in. He didn't sit. She told me she loved me, he said quietly. I figured. I said, no, not just in texts, she told me. In person that night I didn't come to Layla's party. I looked at him, my heart sinking. You saw her? He nodded slowly. She asked to meet. Said she wanted to talk about you and us. I didn't think much of it, but she showed up and just said it. That she'd loved me since last semester. That she thought maybe we were meant to be. I sank onto the edge of the couch. What did you say? I asked, voice tight. I told her no, he said. I told her I cared about her as a friend, but I was with you. I left after that. I believed him. And yet, the fact that he hadn't told me then, that he'd let me spiral in confusion for weeks, made the trust between us feel paper thin. She was hurting? He added, as if that explained anything. She said she felt like a shadow next to you. I closed my eyes. I was tired of being compared to my best friend. Tired of being the unintentional villain in her story. Tired of having to choose between defending myself and trying to understand the hurt she never confessed until it poisoned everything. She wasn't just hurting, I said. She was cruel? He nodded. I know. I just thought you should hear the rest. After he left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down. The lies, the jealousy, the years we spent building a friendship that now felt fake in hindsight. But was it all fake? That was the question that haunted me, because I knew there were moments where Mia had loved me fiercely, where she had shown up, made sacrifices, held my hand through heartbreak. Those memories weren't lies. They were real. But so was the betrayal, so was the resentment she let fester until it bloomed into cruelty. In the coming days, people started choosing sides. Some messaged me, saying they were shocked, that they'd no idea what was going on. Others went quiet. Leela stopped liking my posts. Another girl from the group text unfollowed me without a word. It became clear that whatever story Mia had told them, it didn't paint me kindly. I didn't try to defend myself. I just let them go. It felt like losing my balance in a storm, with no one left to catch me. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while scrolling through an old shared drive of photo albums, I found a video I didn't remember taking. It was from 2 years ago, my birthday. We were at the beach, hair wild in the wind, screaming lyrics to a song playing from a portable speaker. Mia was filming me, giggling, yelling, "Look at her, birthday girl." Her voice in the video was so warm, so bright, so Mia, I cried. Not for what we lost, but for the parts of her I still missed. The version of her that did love me. That didn't see me as competition. That laughed with me like we had all the time in the world. It's strange how grief works when you're mourning someone who's still alive. I didn't respond to Jared's follow-up texts. I didn't go to any more group events. I stopped checking who viewed my stories. I started going on long walks, letting the city pass me by like scenery in someone else's film. And for the first time, I began asking a different question. Not, why did she do this, but how do I rebuild from here? Because there was no going back, only forward. My birthday was coming up again. The first one without Mia. I didn't want to celebrate. The idea of smiling through a party, surrounded by faces that might have once laughed behind my back, made my skin crawl. I told everyone I was laying low. No plans, no gatherings, just a quiet night with takeout and a good book. But fate had other plans. Layla reached out, unexpected but polite. Her message read, "Hey, I know things got messy. I didn't handle it right. Can we talk?" I hesitated. She had been part of the group chat. She had laughed. She hadn't warned me. But she'd also once braided my hair before a presentation when I was shaking from nerves. She'd once stayed up all night helping me study for a final I was sure I'd fail. So I replied, "Sure, one coffee. That's all." We met at a cafe not far from campus, somewhere neutral, just like with Mia. Leila looked nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her drink. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said right away. I need to explain." I said nothing, just waited. She took a breath. It started as venting. Little jokes. Teasing. Maya would say you were acting dramatic or too intense sometimes, and we'd laugh. It didn't seem cruel at first. I raised an eyebrow, but it became cruel. She nodded, yes, and I didn't stop it. I was scared to push back. She has this way of making you feel like you're either with her or against her. And honestly, I was afraid of being her next target. That made something inside me shift, because I knew that about Mia too. She was hurting, Layla continued. Jealous? Yeah. But also sad. I think seeing you succeed made her feel left behind. And instead of talking to you, she poisoned everything around her. I stared into my drink, the foam swirling in soft spirals. She said once. Layla added softly that she wished she could erase you and still keep the memories. That line hit like a cold slap. I swallowed hard. She loved you, Layla said, in her way. But she didn't know how to stop comparing herself. And eventually, loving you turned into resenting you. I finally looked up. That doesn't excuse it? No, it doesn't. But I wanted you to know some of us did feel bad. We just didn't have the guts to face it. I nodded slowly. Thanks for telling me. She left me with a quiet apology and a birthday card. Handwritten, apologetic, a little shaky in tone but sincere. I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I appreciated the attempt. And for the first time, I wondered how many others had been silent not out of cruelty, but fear. That night, Jared texted again. Can I call? Just to wish you happy birthday. I stared at the screen. Then, slowly, I typed back, please don't. I didn't need his voice in my ear. Not this year. Instead, I opened my laptop and played a playlist Maya had made me years ago, back when things were good. Back when we were, the twins, finishing each other's sentences and daring each other to live a little louder. One song in particular hit me harder than the rest. A slow acoustic cover of Yellow, the one she once said reminded her of our friendship. I let it play, I let myself cry, and then I let it go. The next morning, I woke up to something unexpected. A DM from someone I hadn't spoken to since freshman year. Tess, a girl who had quietly faded from our group long ago, saw what happened. Just wanted to say, I left that circle for a reason. If you ever want real company again, I'm around. I smiled. It was small, but it mattered. Because sometimes, healing starts with one person reminding you that you're not crazy, that you're not alone. I replied, coffee next week? Absolutely. There would be no party this year, no speech, no big birthday wish, but there was a flicker of peace. And for now that was enough. I didn't think I'd ever hear Maya's voice again. After the confrontation in the cafe, we both seemed to retreat into separate orbits. She unfollowed me on social media, not in a dramatic, public way, just quietly gone. Like she wanted to erase the evidence that we'd ever been close. I didn't chase her. I let the silence stretch. And in that silence, I began to understand just how much of myself I had tied to being her best friend. The semester rolled on. I spent more time with Tess. Slowly, I rebuilt my life without the old names, the old dynamics, the sharp undercurrents I'd pretended not to feel. It wasn't easy. I missed having someone who knew all my references, who could guess what I was thinking with one glance. I missed our shared language, our shared history. But I didn't miss the unease. One evening in early spring, I ran into someone from the old group. Nina, soft, spoken and sweet, always on the fringe of things. She hesitated before approaching me outside the library. Hey, she said. Is this okay? Talking, I mean. I nodded. Yeah, I don't have a blacklist. She smiled gently. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For not standing up. For seeing it and saying nothing. I appreciated that. More than I could express. But what surprised me most was what she said next. Maya's not doing great, she murmured. She dropped 2 classes. Stopped showing up to study group. She looks tired. Sad. She doesn't talk about you, but I think she misses you. Or the idea of you. That line lingered me. The idea of me. I thanked Nina and we parted ways. That night I dreamt of Mia. We were back in high school, sitting on my bedroom floor with glitter pens, writing letters to our future selves. She laughed when she wrote, married by 25, and underlined it twice. I drew a big heart around the words, live in New York. And then, in the dream, she looked up at me and said, don't forget me, okay? I woke up with tears in my eyes. It would have been easy to keep that door closed forever. But curiosity, maybe even compassion, crept back in. I didn't want to be friends again. But I wanted to understand the full story. So when a mutual friend mentioned that Mia had left something with them for me, I said yes. What I got wasn't a gift. It was a file on a flash drive. A voice memo, the friend said, hesitant. She didn't want a text. Said if you ever listened to it, you'd know why. I waited 3 days before pressing play. The recording crackled for a moment, then her voice came through. Hey, so, this is weird. You're probably never going to listen to this, or maybe you will and hate me more, I don't know. But I needed to say it somewhere, even if it's just into the void. She paused. I heard her take a deep breath. I miss you, not the fake version of you I created in my head. The one I competed with. I miss the real you, the girl who danced with me in the driveway, who cried when I got into my first choice school. The girl who forgave my worst moods and never asked for anything back. Another pause. I got jealous. I let it rot everything. I didn't know how to talk about it without sounding petty or weak, so I said nothing. And when you fell in love, I felt like I lost you, like love took you away from me, which is insane, I know, but it's how it felt. There was a soft sniffle, a rustle of fabric. She was crying. I made you the villain to justify what I did. That's the truth. And now, I don't even like myself when I think about how far it went. The things I said. The things I laughed at. I can't take them back. Silence for a moment. I don't expect you to forgive me. But if you do think of me, I hope you remember something good. Just one memory. I don't deserve it, but I hope for it anyway. The audio ended. I sat still for a long time, not crying, not angry, just full of ache. That was the most honest she'd ever been with me, and it didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it context. And sometimes, context is the beginning of closure. After hearing the recording, I carried her voice around with me for days. I didn't reply. I didn't even tell the mutual friend I'd listened. But Maya's words echoed in odd moments, in line at the grocery store, on quiet bus rides, brushing my teeth before bed. I kept thinking about how she'd said, I made you the villain. Not we fought. Not we drifted. She made me the villain. That kind of admission doesn't erase pain, but it does shift it. Makes it heavier in some places, lighter in others. A week later, I started journaling again. It wasn't a conscious decision. I just found one of our old notebooks in a drawer. The kind with doodled hearts and inside jokes scrawled in the margins. And the pen found my hand. I wrote about the little betrayals, but also the little joys. The time we once laughed so hard in a movie theater we had to leave. The night she stayed on the phone with me when I couldn't stop crying over a missed opportunity. There was real friendship once. That was undeniable. But friendship, like love, can become unrecognizable when left untended, or when tainted by comparison. Around the same time, I started spending more afternoons with Tess. She didn't ask for the whole story, she didn't poke the wound, she just existed with me, kind, steady, present. We went to farmers markets, shared long, thoughtful conversations about books. She never once tried to replace Mia, and maybe that's why I began to feel safe again. One day, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I found a photo folder labeled, Use Viz the World. It was filled with pictures Mia and I had taken over the years, road trips, silly poses in front of landmarks, matching outfits for no reason at all. I clicked through them slowly, letting nostalgia wash over me, not in a way that reopened wounds but in a way that honored what once was. By photo 27, I was smiling, not because I wanted her back, but because for the first time I could miss her without mourning her. Around that same time, Jared texted me again. Just 4 words. Are you okay now? I stared at the message. I hadn't heard from him in over a month. Maybe he thought time had softened me. Maybe he hoped there was still a version of us that could be salvaged. But I didn't need closure from him. I already had it. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the thread. That chapter, finally, could close. Spring turned to early summer. Campus bloomed with life. People packed up dorms and walked across stages, arms raised in triumph. I spent my mornings in the library, headphones on, drafting a new essay about emotional resilience. It wasn't for class, it was for me, a way to process, to pour out everything I'd learned. I titled it, When the Person Who Loved You Hurts You Most. And it wasn't about revenge or bitterness, it was about survival. About how sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from someone who once saw your whole heart and still chose to break it. One evening, while watching the sunset from my apartment balcony, I felt something I hadn't in months. Relief. Not happiness, not yet, but the kind of soft peace that comes from accepting the past without needing to rewrite it. I didn't need an apology every day. I didn't need justice. I just needed space to become myself again, without her reflection coloring my edges. I texted Tess. Feel like seeing a movie tomorrow? She replied instantly. Absolutely. I'll bring popcorn and zero drama. I smiled. There were no dramatic gestures, no big forgiveness arc, just small moments of growth. And sometimes that's the most powerful ending of all. The summer passed slowly, tenderly. There was no rushing through the heat, no checklist of wild adventures, just a deliberate pacing of healing. I worked part-time at a local bookstore, wrote in the mornings, and let myself enjoy the quiet. It was during one of those mornings that I got the email. Subject line, a favor to ask Professor Marlowe. I clicked it open, curious. It was from one of my writing professors, someone who had always encouraged me to dig deeper, to write with honesty even when it hurt. The message was simple: a student had dropped from the fall's campus anthology panel, and he'd thought of me to take their place. He remembered my recent essay. "Your voice," he wrote, as wait. "I think others need to hear it." At first, I hesitated. Sharing my story, even parts of it, felt like bearing a wound in a room full of strangers. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just my story. It belonged to everyone who'd ever trusted too deeply, only to be broken quietly. And maybe if I said it out loud, someone else would feel less alone. I replied with a yes. The days leading up to the event were a blur. I drafted and redrafted the piece, shaping it gently, carefully. It wasn't vindictive. I didn't name names. But I wrote the truth, about best friends, about betrayal, about how it feels when someone who once protected your secrets turns them into punchlines, and how the hardest part isn't what they said or did, but how much of yourself you gave them. The night of the panel, I stood backstage gripping the podium paper like it was a lifeline. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if the audience would hear it before I even opened my mouth. But then, the spotlight found me, and I read about the night Mia gave a birthday speech that felt more like a roast, about discovering a group chat where I was the joke, about the voice memo where she mocked the panic attacks I'd once confided in her, about the coffee shop confrontation and the heartbreak of realizing that someone can look you in the eyes, full of history, and still choose distance. I read until my throat ached. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came the applause, gentle at first, then rising. But what meant more than the sound was the line that formed after. Students, professors, even strangers came to thank me. Not for being strong, but for being honest. One girl said she'd cut off her best friend 2 months ago and still felt guilty. Another whispered, "I thought I was the only one." I went home that night lighter, not because the past had vanished, but because I'd finally placed it somewhere outside of myself. A few days later, Tess sent me a link. "You're in the school paper," she said, laughing. Sure enough, someone had written about the panel. A glowing review with a small quote from my piece highlighted in bold. "We think betrayal is loud, but the worst kind comes dressed in love." It felt surreal to see my pain turned into something meaningful, something that reached beyond me. Weeks passed. I got emails from people who had been in the audience. Some shared their own stories. Some just said, "Thank you." And then, in the middle of all of it, another message. This time, subject, "Read your essay." No greeting, no warmth, just one line. "I deserved it, even if it hurt." That was all. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I thought of everything I could say, everything I could throw back at her. Or forgive. But in the end, I just closed the tab. She didn't need a reply. We'd already said everything that mattered. Through tears, through silence, through the soft fade of friendship into history. That fall, I walked onto campus not as someone's best friend, not as someone's villain, just as myself. It was enough. Autumn arrived with a gentler rhythm than the year before. The trees shed their leaves in quiet flutters and the world seemed to exhale. I had moved into a new apartment across town, smaller, quieter, with warm yellow lighting and a balcony that overlooked a grove of birch trees. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A space untouched by old memories. I kept busy. School, writing, early morning walks with a thermos of tea. Tess became a steady presence, sometimes coming by just to sit in silence and read, other times dragging me out to open mics or cozy bookstores tucked between side streets. She never asked about Mia and I never brought her up. But I felt her absence like a bruise. Not painful, just tender when pressed. One chilly afternoon while reorganizing my bookshelves, I found something wedged between 2 old volumes, a Polaroid of Mia and me from a summer music festival. We were wearing matching sunglasses, holding iced lemonades, mid-laugh. There was something so pure in that moment, something untouched by the slow rot that had come later. I didn't cry. I just stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into the back of my journal. Some memories didn't need to be displayed anymore. But they didn't need to be destroyed either. Around that time, my professor reached out again. This time about a mentorship opportunity. A local nonprofit was looking for writers to help teens process emotional trauma through creative journaling. The idea both excited and terrified me. I wasn't a therapist, I wasn't an expert, but I had survived something. And maybe that was enough. The first workshop was quiet. A group of 6 students, all hovering between awkward silence and guarded stares. But I opened with vulnerability. Told them I'd once trusted someone who broke me quietly. I didn't give names, just emotion, just the shape of the scar. One girl, Lena, opened up by the end of the session. Her voice was soft but clear. "My best friend told everyone I was lying about being assaulted," she said. "It ruined me, but writing helps." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I whispered. "Writing saves you when nothing else can." Week after week, we met in that small classroom with the flickering overhead lights and chit desks. The students wrote letters they'd never send, poems filled with rage, short stories about monsters who wore their friends' faces. Every week, I left feeling both drained and deeply, strangely full. Because they were doing what I had done. Taking back the narrative, and each of them, each broken story, taught me something new about forgiveness, not just of others but of myself. For not seeing the signs sooner. For loving too deeply. For staying quiet too long. One evening after a session, Tess and I grabbed dinner at a noodle bar around the corner. "You've changed," she said casually while twirling noodles around her fork. I looked at her. "How so?" "You laugh differently now," she said. "Softer. Like it's for you, not for the room." I smiled. "That's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing." After dinner, we walked home under string lights and crisp stars. It was one of those nights where the city felt quiet and safe. I felt safe. Tess glanced at me as we stopped at my door. "You ever think you'll talk to her again?" I considered the question. "I think I've said everything I need to," I replied. "And I think she has too." She nodded and didn't press. Because some friendships don't need a reunion, they need release. That night, I took the Polaroid from my journal and placed it in a small envelope. On the outside, I wrote one word: "Thanks." Then I tucked it into the back of a drawer and closed it. I didn't need to send it. I didn't need her to read it. But I needed to mean it, because even broken stories have beginnings that were beautiful. Winter settled in with its quiet hush, covering the city in layers of frost and silver mornings. My new routine became almost sacred: early writing, slow walks, and workshop evenings. I'd started submitting essays again, a mix of personal reflections and thematic pieces on friendship, loss, and identity. One even got picked up by a national online journal. People started reaching out, strangers who read my words and saw their own lives mirrored back. Messages like, "I thought I was the only one who lost my best friend like this. Your story helped me finally block someone I should have years ago." The kindness of strangers felt warmer than the cold silence left by old friends. In early January, I was invited to speak at a panel hosted by the same nonprofit I'd volunteered with. They wanted former students, mentors, and writers to talk about emotional healing through creative work. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to speak that publicly again, but something inside me, a quiet voice, steady and certain, nudged me forward. The event was small, held in a local library with worn wooden floors and the faint scent of paper and time. I wore a soft navy sweater, boots that didn't pinch, and carried notes I barely glanced at. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out over the audience and saw her. Mia. She sat in the back row, half hidden by a bookshelf, hair shorter, posture still poised, but there was something different about her. She looked small. Not in stature, in presence. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just watched. My heart twisted, but I didn't break. I spoke anyway. I told the story. Not hers, not Jared's, just mine. I spoke about the version of myself that once built a life around another person's orbit. About the pain of realizing your favorite memories were shared with someone who now lives in silence on the other side of the world, emotionally speaking. I said, closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology. Sometimes, closure is the moment you stop needing one. The room was still. I stepped down, and Tess met me with a hug that didn't ask anything of me. She didn't mention Mia. We left together, coats pulled tight against the cold. But that night at home, I found an envelope slipped into my mailbox. No name, just my address scrawled in shaky ink. Inside, one page. I wasn't brave enough to listen before. I'm listening now. I folded the note and tucked it away without ceremony. No text, no reply. She had her closure. I had mine. The second winter since our friendship ended passed with snow and silence. But the silence no longer hurt. It was simply part of the weather. Time does something strange when you're healing. It stops measuring itself in days and starts counting in moments. The first time you laugh without guilt, the first time you remember them without anger, the first time you realize you haven't thought about them in weeks. Those were the landmarks now. By spring, I no longer jumped when my phone buzzed. I no longer scrawled through old messages. I no longer searched her name in photos, half hoping she'd resurface with a caption that felt like a breadcrumb. I had stopped waiting for Maya to return. Not because I hated her, but because I had finally accepted that our chapter had closed. And yet, grief isn't a clean exit. One morning, while organizing my files for a grad school application, I found the draft of an old article. One I had written the summer before everything fell apart. It was a tribute to Mia. Tentative title: The Girl Who Taught Me How to Dream. I hadn't touched it since. I hadn't been able to. But now, I read it all the way through. In it, I described her as fearless. As the girl who jumped into lakes first and made me believe in art and late-night pancakes. The girl who challenged my insecurities with one raised eyebrow, who could turn a rainy afternoon into a memory worth keeping. And then, in the margin, a note I had scribbled in pencil: she's not perfect. But neither am I. I sat back and let that wash over me. I wasn't rewriting the past. I wasn't forgiving what shouldn't be forgotten. But I was softening to it, letting it exist without defining me. That weekend, Tess and I took a trip upstate, a little cabin by the lake, 2 days of nothing but trees, silence, and the occasional board game. We talked about the future, grad school, dreams, writing. We toasted with hot cider and watched the stars flicker like secrets we hadn't yet learned to tell. On our last night, we sat by the fireplace. I asked her, "Do you ever think about people who used to know you?" She looked into the fire for a long time. "Yeah," she said. "But I think about who I've become more." I smiled. "That's a good answer." She turned to me. "And you? Do you still miss her?" I thought about it. "I think I miss the idea of us more than the reality," I said. "We were never going to grow in the same direction. I just didn't want to admit it." She nodded. "It takes guts to let go." I didn't feel brave, just real. Back in the city, things settled again. I wrapped up my mentorship program, submitted my graduate application, and got an invitation to contribute regularly to a student-led journal. Life didn't get easier, it just got clearer, and clarity, I learned, is its own kind of peace. Months later, I walked past the coffee shop where it all came undone. I paused at the door, half tempted to go in, not to relive anything, just to see how the light looked now. I stepped inside. It hadn't changed, same overstuffed chairs, same chipped teacups. But I had changed. I ordered a tea, sat in the far corner, and pulled out my notebook. And there, in my softest handwriting, I wrote, "I still remember her laugh, and I hope she remembers mine, but we're not each other's home anymore, and that's okay?" I tore out the page and left it on the table when I left, for no one, for anyone, for me. Summer returned with golden skies and the kind of heat that slows everything down. It had been almost 2 years since Mia and I had last spoken. 2 years since I'd learned the truth, confronted it, and began the long work of living beyond it. My days were different now. Peaceful in a way that would have once felt boring. I wrote for a small online publication. I taught a weekend journaling class. I planted herbs in mismatched ceramic pots on my windowsill. My life no longer felt like a performance for someone else's expectations. It just was. One afternoon in early July, I got a message from Layla. "Thought you might want to see this." Attached was a photo of a handwritten letter, folded and left in the back of a poetry book at the campus library. The handwriting was unmistakable. I hadn't seen it in so long, but I knew it immediately. It was Maya's. The letter read, "I don't know who will find this. Maybe no one. But I need to leave it somewhere. There was a girl I loved once. Not romantically, more like, she was the moon I circled. I don't think I ever really knew how to be beside her without shrinking. That's not her fault. She was kind, brilliant, loud in the ways I couldn't be, and I hurt her. I let jealousy rot me. I mocked her when I should have celebrated her. I betrayed her without even meaning to. I don't want to be remembered for that version of myself. But I probably will be, and maybe that's fair. If she ever sees this, if you ever see this, I want you to know you were never too much. I was just not enough of myself to stand beside you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be someone worth forgiving." I read it twice, 3 times. Then I cried. Not because I missed her. Not because I wanted her back. But because, for the first time, I believed she truly understood. And that mattered, even from afar. I didn't reach out, I didn't have to. That letter wasn't for a reconnection. It was a eulogy. For the girl she had been, for the friendship we'd shared, and for the love we couldn't sustain. I printed a copy and tucked it into my own journal, not as a symbol of closure, but as a signpost. A moment in time when 2 people, once best friends, both found the courage to face themselves. These were stories that show the limits of friendship, that even the ones who know us best can carry wounds they never voice, and sometimes their silence becomes the loudest betrayal of all. But also, these were stories of growth, of finding strength in solitude, of learning to love again, this time without losing yourself in the process. If you've ever been betrayed by a best friend, or felt the sharp cut of jealousy where there once was only laughter, you're not alone. And if you've healed, even just a little, I hope you're proud. Because survival isn't loud, it's quiet, like finally sleeping through the night without dreaming of the goodbye.